I actually had pitting edema in my lower legs in my late 20s. So I'm a lot older now and I don't have it. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I did, as well as some other causes, common causes, rare causes, and what to do with each one. So specifically, I want to talk about edema in the lower legs and the feet. So a lot of people have it, a lot of people take medication, but they don't actually at the same time correct the underlying cause. So cause number one is sugar and a high carb diet, and as that relates also to a spike in insulin. Okay, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you consume excess amounts of sugar, what happens, your body has to store the sugar as glycogen. Okay, what is glycogen? Glycogen is a series of glucose molecules stuck together with potassium. Okay, so they're going to basically, when you consume sugar, it's going to use up potassium to store this glycogen, and water. So with every glucose that you're going to store, okay, you're going to store 3 water molecules. Okay, so you're going to store a lot more water compared to glucose when you consume glucose, slash sugar. So this is all retained fluid. This is why when someone goes on a low carb diet, they just dump a lot of water, like real quick. Within the first week, it could be anywhere between 7 to 13 pounds of water weight. So eating sugar and refined carbs causes water retention from glycogen. It also causes a potassium deficiency when you consume sugar too. And when you lower your potassium, okay, ratio to sodium, we have this retention of fluid. So in other words, we all know that sodium retains fluid. Well, potassium is the antidote to that. So the less potassium you have available, because it's all locked up within this glycogen, then you're going to actually cause retention of fluid just because of the relative sodium in your body in low potassium. But also the spike in insulin, okay, which is associated with the glucose, causes an additional factor of retention of sodium from the spike in insulin. This is why diabetics are just like they have this puffy fluid retention in the lower legs and the feet, because they have a high glucose running through the bloodstream all the time, because obviously they didn't discover the low carb diet connection to solving this mystery. Now, on top of that, when you consume refined sugars, you get a depletion of B1. And a B1 deficiency can also cause edema or swelling in your legs and your feet. So the solution can be corrected by going on a low carb diet. It's called the ketogenic diet. All right, number two, consuming a lot of sodium without the buffer called potassium. Potassium protects you against too much sodium. In fact, it's not even a big concern if you have a lot of salt in your diet, as long as you have the protective potassium that comes along with it. And you definitely need at least twice as much potassium than you do sodium. So the requirements for potassium are kind of shocking to people once they find out how much they need. The RDAs call for 4,700 milligrams. That's how much potassium we need. So if you have that much potassium, you can buffer the bad effects of sodium, like fluid retention. So anything that increases the sodium without at the same time increasing potassium can create a problem. So let's talk about what can do that. Well, number one, consuming a lot of salty foods without a lot of potassium foods. Like, I know this might be shocking, but some people don't like vegetables, right? So they don't consume much vegetable. Now, why am I saying that? Because the average person in America, at least, consumes only 1.5 cups of vegetables per day. Do you realize to get your potassium, you would have to consume at least 7 to 10 cups of salad every single day? So that's a lot of greens, but that will provide the potassium to really help buffer this sodium and get rid of a lot of fluid. Now, some other people, what they do is they do a combination. They increase their vegetables, but they also take a potassium electrolyte supplement so they can actually get more potassium to push out the fluid. And that can happen pretty quick. In fact, if you take potassium and the next day when you wake up, you'll notice that, wow, my puffiness in my legs are much less. Now, another hidden source of sodium is MSG, monosodium glutamate, which you would get in a fast food restaurant, right? All these Delicious tasting, addictive junk foods or fast foods are loaded with MSG. MSG dilates your taste buds to make things taste better than it really is. You'll usually be hungry like an hour and a half later. MSG also spikes insulin, so it's kind of like eating sugar. So it's a double-edged sword because the next day after consuming this really tasty food from a fast food restaurant, you'll notice the next day like you're all swollen, you can't pull your rings off, your feet are all puffy. Listen, I used to do that. I have firsthand knowledge of that. I used to live on fast food for a few decades. So just do an experiment. Just cut out those foods, start increasing potassium, and watch how the fluid goes away. Now, another thing in relationship to sodium. So when people have high blood pressure or they have fluid retention, they're usually given a diuretic. Diuretics get rid of fluid because they cause an excess release of sodium. So it gets rid of sodium, so it gets rid of the fluid. Problem solved, right? Well, there's one minor complication. It has a side effect of something called hypokalemia. Now, what is hypokalemia? That means low potassium. That's right. Those diuretics decrease your potassium. So here you are trying to get rid of your fluid, getting rid of your sodium, but you're also getting rid of your potassium. Guess what that's going to do? It's going to make things worse. As a natural diuretic, you can just eat foods high in potassium. Sometimes you can even take the rind of watermelon, just the rind part, or any melon, and juice that and drink that, and you will wake up the next day and you'll just like get rid of a lot of fluid. And the rind of these melons are loaded with potassium. Another cause of fluid retention is low protein in your blood, but this most likely is not stemming from you not consuming enough protein. It's coming from either liver damage or kidney damage. You see, your liver makes certain proteins like albumin. And when the liver is damaged, like in cirrhosis or a fatty liver, it can't make sufficient amounts of that protein. So now we're going to have low protein in the blood. And what happens is like this protein in the blood attracts water. So it keeps the water in your blood. When the protein goes down, you lose the water and it goes out of the bloodstream and it starts to accumulate in between the cells, causing edema and swelling. This is why with advanced liver disease, you usually see pitting edema in the lower legs. You see people with a lot of swelling. Usually the liver problem will cause swelling on the right ankle and leg before the left, and the left ankle or foot or lower leg is more heart initially, but then it kind of spreads off into both. Also, when you have kidney damage, the kidney is the filter. So if it can't filter this blood, okay, and help recycle these proteins, you end up losing a lot of protein in the urine. And this is one way they diagnose kidney disease is by having protein in the urine. So that means you're losing protein in the blood, and that means you're going to retain fluid from that. So both liver damage and kidney damage can create edema. Number 4, a heart problem. So if you have heart disease, congestive heart failure, there's a lot of different types of problems with the heart. It's either not going to pump the fluid that well, and then what's going to happen, you're going to get congestion in the vascular system through the capillaries, and that can show up in the lower legs. Or it could be partly because of the high blood pressure that's pushing fluid, and you're ending up with edema from that angle. But of course, the solution is to fix the heart. I have a lot of videos on what to do for that. Natural things that you can do for heart health. But of course, a bad heart can definitely create fluid retention in the lower extremities. Now, the next one has to do with the thyroid. Now, this can happen in both hypothyroidism as well as hyperthyroidism. It's called myxedema. It looks like it's a fluid retention situation, but it's not. And you see it kind of like could be all over the body. It's kind of like this puffy, like tissue in the lower extremities, like around your lower legs. It could be in the arms. And again, it's not edema. It's not even fat. It's this waste product from your metabolism. And the name of it is called a mucopolysaccharide. So it actually has sugar connected to this protein. And because of that, it does retain, bind to some fluid, but it's very, very different than like edema that's in your legs. And apparently, they don't know exactly what causes this, but it has something to do with a spike in the thyroid stimulating hormone. And there has been some results with this if you catch it in time by giving the person iodine or whatever the thyroid needs to support the thyroid health. But again, the solution always has to be aligned with the underlying cause. So you have to start working on why you have this hyper or hypothyroid problem in the first place. And I have a lot of videos on that. I'll put a couple videos down below. Now, the next one is called lipedema. And this has to do with this abnormal fat accumulation in your tissues, primarily in the lower part of your body. They don't know a lot about it, but it's associated with the person having this hormonal slash genetic problem with too many estrogen receptors, because estrogen can cause fat in the lower part of the body. It can actually just make more fat. And a lot of times this condition is triggered when someone is pregnant or even in puberty when they have this spike of estrogen, even sometimes in menopause when you have this, it's a relative higher amounts of estrogen compared to progesterone. That's a completely different situation. It's not fluid, and it's a very difficult problem to solve. But there's been some studies, and I'll put the link down below, of some pretty good dramatic benefits from going on a low carb, higher fat diet. So definitely you want to try that if you have this condition. Number 7 has to do with the side effects of medication. If you start getting edema from the side effect from a medication, you're going to have to get with your doctor and make some adjustments. And I would always recommend when you talk to a doctor, always, ask questions about like what's really causing this problem. Why don't we get to the root cause? And also, how long do I have to be on this medication? Does it actually ever correct this problem? And are there safer alternatives in the maybe herbal area that have lesser amounts of side effects? But if you can pinpoint when you started getting swelling in the lower legs and then what happened just before that, medications are a big cause. So you might want to get with your doctor on that one. And just as a side note on that, anytime you're on medications, the number one organ that seems to be affected most is the liver. So milk thistle is a great kind of a liver protective natural remedy to help buffer some of these side effects or complications that might occur from just taking the medication. So milk thistle is a good remedy. But common medications that can cause edema is NSAIDs, usually used for pain and inflammation, calcium channel blockers, and diabetic medications, and also steroids. Last point is lymphedema. Now, this one is a very difficult thing to work with because you're having this problem in the lymph system, and the lymph system is kind of connected to the arterial system, but it's doesn't have like a pump. So you have a lot of backup congestion in the lymph system. And so manual lymphatic drainage is a great therapy for this. Using compression garments is another solution. Low-level laser therapy has also been known to produce some good benefits, as well as regular or consistent exercise can help to push some of this lymph back into the place where it needs to be in and out of your lymphatic system. All right, so now that you have a lot of potential reasons for edema, I think the next most important video for you to watch would be the one on what to really eat for the majority of problems related to this edema. And for that information, I put this video up right here. Check it out.